Hello and welcome. I'm going to talk about DraftKings, and the more and more I'm looking at this, the more and more variables and factors that I got to work with. This is most certainly one of those spots where I have to pick my spots, and there's a lot of profit in it, which is using math, and I'm going to go over that. And this is for DraftKings, a highly ranked game, although there can be times, last night included, where there really isn't any rake, and I'll explain that in the game. Or in this video. So, therefore, let's talk about it. What you do in this, it's like a poker tournament as far as payouts. A whole bunch of people play. Top whatever percent get paid, 20%, 10%, 30%, however it may be. And then top heavy at the top part of the first place prize, and so on and so forth. And in doing so, you put a lineup together in a showdown where you have a captain, which costs 1.5 times more in price, but also scores that in points as well. So you're basically looking to put the person who has the best game as your captain. Then five other players, which is pretty much the next best five, at least within the salary cap, within the roster. And you must have at least one on the opposing team. Let's talk about parlay odds. We will even further more, but we want to pick one on the opposing team. Shots on goal are a great ideal, are ideal, but all fantasy scorers will work. And within it, we're looking for situations on parlay odds. Well, if I'm taking a goalie, I'm going to want to take guys on my own team. With other four players, pick players on the goalie. So you're going to pick a goalie and somebody, of course, on the other spot. So you want to pick like four different players. You want to focus on players that play together on both the regular and power play lines. When you're mixing defense and forwards, try to mix the ones that are on the same power play line. And if you know, the ones that do play in regular strength more often. Although the site that I use, Daily Faceoff, doesn't state that information. But they have power play line 1, power play line 2, and the four regulation lines. So I'm going to look for forwards who would play on the same line, not only on the regular strength, but on the power play as well, because then they can get goals and assists together. Because that's what I'm looking to do on the parlay odds is get that in play within. Now let's talk about the types of games. And I got it in five different categories. One, a high scoring, which is bad. 8-5, 9-4. These basically when the losing team gets 3 goals, that's just another way. Anytime when the losing team gets, but 4-3 is kind of iffy. Any time score 5-3 and greater, but even 4-3 is pretty bad as well. It's a common score, but it's a bad score. And then the high scoring that aren't so bad, 8-2, 7-1. Basically, with the other team doesn't does pretty well, and a lot of it is games of shots as well. When the team, your goalie, maybe faces 18 shots in a winning cause, that's a bad situation, but that's a rare situation as well. Then you got shutouts. Well, when you on the right side of the shutout, that's a good thing because fantasy points and getting a shutout is good. Allowing just one goal, 2-1, 3-1, 4-1, 5-1. That's an amazing situation playing these lineups. Every single one from 2-1 all the way up to even 9-1. Although the higher scoring it is, the kind of that means that you got situations where a position player can be captain, which is can hurt you. Not always even, but at 9-1 more so, yes. And depending on who that player is, of course, on the ownership he's picked, can hurt your top end cashes. But very commonly, a goalie will be the best, get the most points. And then you got the common scores like 3-2, 4-2, and 4-3. And with the exception of really 4-3, the 3-2 and 4-2 aren't so bad. Now, if your goalie wins a game that's like 4-1, 7-2, 2-0, 2-1, 3-1, etc., would you rather have a lot of players who are more or less likely to score goals and assists? Meaning, you got your goalie as captain, so the final score is 4-1. There's going to be 5 goals. Would you rather take the pool of the 4 or on the 1, on the 7 or the 2? So on the parlay odds, again, that's why you want to stick 4 players from the goalie that you pick because they're going to allocate the most points. And by doing this, this strategy will put much, much more of your finishes either in the top or bottom quarter of the field. So in a 1,000 player game, finishing 250 to 750 is going to be a lot rarer than in the top or bottom 250 of the field. Last night I finished way at the bottom because the Kings lost uh, 3-0, and that's who I played. But we'll get into that in a little bit. But next, ownership and probability. This is big. This is more advanced, and I think very, very important. Ownership, I know in three different methods. Ownership is how often they're going to take one side or another, and even for that player. But for this, I'm talking about the team in general. In the game last night between the Los Angeles Kings and the Buffalo Sabres, 2/3 of the field was on the team that won, the Buffalo Sabres. They played in LA against the Kings. So 1/3 was the Kings, 2/3 was the Sabres. So basic is obvious stuff you know in the brain. And I knew going in that more people were on the Sabres because they're winning all the time and the Kings are losing. Kings have been bad defensively. I just know that's going to be the case. And the Kings are not a team that people really like. They're not but neither are the Sabres really. But it's what you it's a short-term memory bias, which means a lot. And when you're looking at consensus and where the public is going, a lot of people think more on the recent term, which is just more common. You can also go to covers.com, and they even stated yesterday that those ownerships was extremely skewed of that 2-to-1 ratio. Now you have to know how to read that too, because you could have big money line favorites of big portions, and the numbers are going to be higher. But when you are experienced and you look at it and see how the third one results from the actual DraftKings, what I do is I download the CSV file, or CS or CZ, whatever, the spreadsheet program. I think it is CSV. And then I find out the captains. And what I do by that is I get the data, I separate the final field where it says CPT, I put that into its own cell, and then I count every player. And what I counted today was that 33% or so played the Kings and 66 or so played the Sabres. You can also get this just by looking at the game. When you look at in the box scores, find the percentage that the top goalies are owned. It was like Jack Eichel was way, way highly owned compared to Anze Kopitar. And then Jack Campbell was much lower, noticeably lower owned than Hutton of the Buffalo Sabres. So it was even shown that way. But getting the results from there, and after playing a day in and day out, and you see like a bunch of times, you're like, yeah, I know for sure in this particular game, one side's going to be heavily on the other. But then we got to move it over to probability. Because you can be in a spot where everybody's going to be on one side, but what's the chances they actually win? And in Vegas odds, I can easily calculate that, and I did. I just took two random examples. Say a game, the favorite is minus 140 and the underdog is plus 120. Well, that means they say the favorite is going to win about 56.6% of the time. How do I know that? Well, this is a juice line, but I take the middle number, which would be 130. And decimal, that would be 2.3, which is very easy to calculate. If it's 230, it's 2.3. If it's 130, it's 2.3. If it's plus 180, it's 2.8. If it's plus, in this case, plus 220, 3.2. So plus 130 would be that. So I take the decimal of the 1x of 2.3, which is, one subtract this, 0.434, which means 43.4% for the underdog and 56.6% for the favorite. Now plus 220 minus 280, there was a differential of, say, it is 60 points, so I would add 30. So plus 250 equals 3.5. That tells me that the favorite has got a 71% chance of winning. So if 65% of the people are going to play one side where there's a 71% chance they're going to win, then it's not owned enough. But if 80, 90% play it, and the Giants versus game against the in football recently, and it's the same strategy, use it for this, so the showdown's there as well. But although it's much different for their games because of field sizes and payouts, but within the hockey game, when you got a 71% chance, if 90% are on one side, I'm going to want to go on the 10% side, big time, because I realize that 28% of the time I'm going to be right, and most times than not, I'm going to get a good common score, which is going to work out as well. You also want to look at things like the over/under. This can affect different things too. Also, different, just more advanced stuff like who the scorers are. When you got sexy scorers, is a way to put it, is in they're the ones that are going to be picked as captain, like the Connor McDavids and the Jack Eichels. That makes playing goalies even better. But when there's games when no one really has an amazing scorer too much, it's not as the goalies get picked more often. You want to work on the consensus so that people aren't picking the guys that you are. And handicapping is Vegas wrong, and that worked out last night. At first, I thought actually the card that hadn't played the game before, and Allmark was going to play, and then Allmark was he played, so geez, now Buffalo should be favored. I was thinking. Well, Vegas was giving the people even odds, plus 100, which means minus 120 on the Kings side for the game, and then it got even higher than that. It got to like plus 110 on the Sabres. They were giving you a bit better than even odds. And yet they were doing this when the public was on the Sabres. So the Vegas lost big that night. They lost on that because depending on how big the sharp money was. Because what happened was somebody probably bet big on the Kings. So outside of that, these books would have lost because people were betting on that. But I realized that half the time I play this, according to them, if not like 53% of the time, it was the fact that it was going to be the Kings beating the Sabres. And if I play this 100 times and 53 times they should win, and of those 53 games, I should have some good scores in my favor amongst it. And when you play against the consensus, that means when you look at the payout fields of 4 times, 5 times, 10 times, 20 times higher field prizes, if not even bigger, and definitely bigger than that as well too, you become very live to win those, even more so when you hit those games, when you are able to be in a spot where not as many people are on your situation side. And then you play a spot where, again, a 4-1 kind of game, you end up playing players that score more towards your side. Now, there's a fourth aspect, too, on how strong a play is and how easy is it to put a lineup. Because when I was looking at the Sabres one, it wasn't as fun to put a pro Sabres lineup in. But there was one lineup last night on the Kings side that was just, oh my goodness, so strong. And it finished in the bottom 3%, but long term, it was very strong. And again, these finished near the very top and very bottom purposefully. So I'm going to finish many, many times at the bottom and at the top. But whether I finish at the bottom 1% or the bottom 60 or 70%, I get paid nothing. So the question is your lineup card easy, hard, or neutral? Last night it was huge and easy. Again, it did really bad overall. I always put the goalie as captain. It was Jake Campbell. And for the side on the Kings, well, first I put in Jake McCabe in for the Sabres. And coming into yesterday in 7 games, he had 20 shots that were blocked. And in this game, if you get 3 blocked shots in one game, you get bonus points. And he got bonus points last night when he registered 4. So I'm looking for spots. Well, if I'm going to be winning games where it's going to be hard for the opponents to score, at least I'm going to hope to get shots and blocks. So that's why I look for players like that. But again, if I'm putting in someone who can get goals and assists and stuff like that, there's going to be games where I win 4-1 and 3-2, and I get that player that scores for me. So I'm going to be looking at really any type of fantasy player. But yeah, I'm going to focus more on players of this type of nature. So anytime I fade the Sabres, I'm going to look for McCabe every time first. Because I'm going to find out who the heavy shot blockers are and players, usually on the defensive position. And the costs usually aren't too expensive. He was my second cheapest, but it was with the captain position. It was 14,000, 1.5 times price on this. So my 4 Kings. Well, the first one was the defenseman in Ben Hutton. Well, that was the last one. No, Sean Walker was the first one. Drew Doughty is the top defenseman on the Kings, but he was listed as out in the game, and he was listed as out all day. That information was known in the morning that he was out. Yet he was still played a large percentage of the time, even though you knew he was out. So right then and there, you know, if there is player injured, then there's going to be a lot of dead lineups. There's always dead lineups because they start backup goalies every single time. Those are dead lineups. So enough of those dead lineups make it so that that 18% rake is actually lower. When you're playing a game where like 12, oh, like 1,180 people get paid, and on a $1 a game, and it's a 1,000, or no, excuse me, 1,189 people, 1,189, or 189 more than 1,000, and it's $1 a game for 1,000 prize pool. That means they're taking $189, and that's like 18%, 19%. But when you have those people not playing in those dead lineups, that just makes it so maybe it's 4% rake, and in some cases it's big. So if you find out like there's news, like say uh, 4 hours before the game, surprising news of a player that's not playing, and there's still lineups available to register, I'm going to look to register because I know there's going to be dead lineups and the rake is gone. And it doesn't matter which side you're looking at because of the injury. There's going to be there's information based on that as well. And this was the case here with Sean Walker. But it meant with Kopitar, or excuse me, with Doughty being out, that the out of it might be like around 1,000 or so, 1,020, 1,030 lineups that are not dead from the start. So therefore, we have Sean Walker, who was basically going to replace him. His statistics were very, very good. He was getting good ice time. He was getting shots on goal. He was getting points. So to me, he felt like he was a daily faceoff didn't update the lines, but to me, he looked like the logical person that would replace him on the power play. I didn't see any highlights or anything. I don't know who did replace him at all as it was. But again, they didn't score. Actually, I can check the power play time on box score. I don't know how to do it. But anyway, after that, that left. So I had Campbell in, I had McCabe in, and I had Walker in my lineup. I needed three other players, and Kopitar was the next guy I put in. He was the next big player. And Dustin Brown plays with them on both the power play and the penalty kill line. That left me with 4,500. I left 300 off my cap. So I went with the best player that I could find. And for 4,200, Ben Hutton is a very good player. He is way underpriced. So his value is like, oh my goodness, the mathematical play on this lineup long term to me becomes very, very strong. So as I move forward, I'm going to be looking at all of these factors, and sort of like in the wildlife, how you got like an eagle, or you have a large mammal that's a snake, or definitely a snake. When you're finding your prey, you're very picky. You're just going to sit and wait and just wait for your spot, and then when it's there, you go aggressive because for an animal, you have to spend a lot of energy running like a tiger to go after what you're going for. And if you don't get it, it's a failed opportunity, and energy is what that animal's cost is. And it could work out that they have to eat. I'm going to say berries, but in the sense of whatever the easy food is. I don't know if that's rabbits or whatnot. But you know, you get there's good the food, the best food, the hard food, and the easy food. Or it's a losing cause. And in this case, when you find a spot that doesn't look as strong, you don't have the probability of winning. You have a higher chance of losing within it. So I'd like to thank you for tuning in. And if you have any questions, let me know. For tonight's game, if you're watching this live, it's a game between Carolina at Anaheim. That's on the showdown. They usually give one a game day. Sometimes they'll do two or maybe three. But I look at every game that's available, of course. And the consensus on covers for that game is pretty much 50-50 early on. Both teams have very similar records. And I'm going to have to think that the consensus is going to be very close to even. As far as handicapping the game, I can't pick a winner. So I have to think it should be around the minus 110, minus 120 for the favorite, or there's no big favorite. And also, I have to think that there's no sexy players, and the goalies are going to be heavily owned compared to the average game. Although they're lowly owned normally every single time, which is why I like playing them because their ownership is way too low compared to how often they should be owned. In football, the captains you play are wide receiver, tight ends, and defense, but it's a much more complicated game. But once you know that complication, it's easy to play. It doesn't take long to put a lineup in, and a good one that's mathematically possible. But this one, this is like a poker game. I come in and I'm expecting that long term, or short term rather, if I play 10, 20, 30 of these, I'm going to be up. In football, if I play 10, 20, or 30, I expect to lose. If I play 30,000 football ones, I expect to win because of the sample size. Thank you for tuning in. Have yourself a great day. Bye bye.